Okay. Hi, Mark.
Hi, Karen.
Yeah, thank you for joining us today. Because this is the first video of USIMI Group talking about L1 for Vietnam investors. So let me first introduce about Mr. Mark. Mr. Mark is the founder and CEO of DNA Law Firm Group. DNA is very well known and famous in immigration market in worldwide and in Vietnam. The successful rate of DNA is almost 100% on other programs like EB5 and L1, E2. So there is a lot of information in L1 market about the company in Vietnam have to reach like $1 million of revenue to be qualified for L1. So what do you think about that information?
I think that's totally wrong. So we have many clients who don't have $1 million in revenue, all of whom have gotten an L1 visa. The other common mistake I hear is I definitely hear people say that you have to have a certain minimum number of employees for an L visa. Now, it is true that to get an L1A visa, you do need a certain number of, if you're claiming to be a manager, you would need a certain number of fundamental employees in certain types of roles. However, the idea that you need 60, 70, or that order of magnitude of employees is again just not in the law, and it's completely false. So the smallest we've ever had is a company that had 5 employees in its foreign non-US operations, and that case was approved.
Okay. So basically, the USCIS doesn't require a minimum of revenue for L1 or a minimum number of employees at all?
No, but there's no minimum number or minimum revenue, but it has to be a serious, bona fide, viable business.
Okay.
So Karen, if you have a business that has revenues of $1 a year, that's a non-starter. Okay. But the revenue is going to need to be reasonable to be able to run the business, and you need to have the right number of employees to viably operate the business, and the right number of employees to qualify for L1, but there's no minimum number. Okay. It's more about the employees who report to the visa applicant for an L1A and what their roles are in the company, and making sure that those people are in roles that are consistent with the L1A visa regulations.
Okay, so the most important is the number of managers, not the number of the employees.
Right. So I think what you're talking about is if you're applying for a manager, an L1A visa as a manager, then you are required to have supervisory or managerial level employees, managerial or professional employees reporting into you, and because you're required to be a manager. And according to USCIS, for that category, in order to be a manager, you're not doing a lot of the menial tasks yourself.
Okay.
But people worry about this, and a well-prepared case is really a non-issue. As you know, we just haven't had problems generally in Vietnam. Certainly, we've never had a problem with the consulate in Vietnam. The consulate in Vietnam so far has been great with L1s, very communicative. Really, Vietnam seems to be a great place to file an L1 visa.
Thank you for that information. And for L1, the USCIS require minimum investment capital for US entity at all, or?
The answer to that really, Karen, is yes and no. So no, there is no minimum amount of investment required. Generally, I have in mind a number of about $50,000, but that's not an official number. That's what I think about. Why? Because the US business has to be properly formed and set up. Now, as many of your clients do and succeed thanks to you and your firm, USIMI is very good at getting the applications approved. And what I notice is you're very good at setting up new businesses. Obviously, if someone's setting up a small new business, under new business rules, that would be an exception to what you're talking about. So with a brand new business, you don't have to have the full number of employees that you need for managerial. You have a year to set it up. So that's also why that starting capital the capital invested to start a new business might be very low, but I mean, you have a lot of clients that do this, right, Karen?
Yes, yes. They spend their investment money years later than in the first one. Talking with that, the USCIS prefer like certain type of business model or any kind of business models can work with L1?
USCIS are open to any kind of genuine business. So I think one of the interesting questions is perhaps a question for you, because you're certainly one of the leading firms in Southeast Asia for like L1 visas. So I think a really interesting question would be, what kind of businesses do your clients use for L1s, and how successful are they?
Okay, actually we offer all kinds of business for our L1 investor, like trading or transportation, or even franchise like a bubble tea shop or even nail shops. Any kind of business that our investor wants, we can offer for them. Okay. We have our US team in Houston and Houston, California, and Florida. Then can go out and look for new business for our clients.
Okay, that's great. So you help people, because obviously with an L1 visa, you can either start a new business or you can expand an existing business, right?
Yes.
How many of your clients start a new business as opposed to expand an existing business?
More than half of our L1 student, L1 investor, like open a new business than do an existing business.
That's an interesting thing, because I think they probably are your students too.
Students
because
too.
you know a lot about L visas, so I think these people are your students too.
Yeah. For L1 visa, like children under 21 can like have like a very good tuition for school. That's why a lot of L1 Vietnam investor can like take advantage of that benefit. So does the USCIS require the same line of business in Vietnam and in the US? We do parents and or friends entity in the US?
That's a very good question, Karen. And the answer to that is no. So one of my favorite examples is we had a client who owned a rubber tire factory, and they opened an ice cream place in America. So they absolutely do not have to be in the same business. That said, it's not required, but we always like in the business plan to explain why the foreign entity is diversifying into another business in America. I think it's helpful, but it's not required.
Okay, so even the relationship between the foreign company and the US company is parent or friend? They doesn't require the same type of business at all?
No, so there's different ways to qualify. Okay. So you must have a Vietnamese business or business outside America and a business inside America. And so the two companies, I think what you're saying, have to be related, right? So then the Vietnamese business either needs to own 50% or more of the US business, or the same person or group of persons needs to own and control both companies. It's just two different ways to do it.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you for your information. And I have a lot of questions about B1, B2 visa and L1 visa, because there's a lot, that the B1, B2 interview in Vietnam is like not guaranteed 100%. So we have a lot of tourist visa B1, B2 got denial in the consular here. So can they still be qualified for L1? And
yes, they can. Yeah. So one of the consular officers' concerns of a B1 is always going to be, is the person going there for the purpose of a short-term visit? One of the advantages of an L1 visa is, firstly, it'll already have had an approval from USCIS. But secondly, you're saying that the person is going to work in a bona fide company in America. So you're not really dealing with the issue of, is someone just intending to go there for a temporary trip to Disney World or something, because the person is declaring in the application that they're going to go and work there.
Because again, there's a lot of rumor in the market, L1 market, that if you got like visa B1, B2 denial, that if you go to L1 and the interview is very difficult, and you're gonna get the denial on the L1 for you and your family.
Well, it would depend on the reason that the B1 was denied too. You know, if they are denying a B1 because you're a convicted international drug smuggler, then that's going to be a problem for your L visa as well. But if they're denying the B1 visa, probably most commonly for failure to have links to Vietnam, and the officer feels that you're going to be going to work in America, then, you know, it might be slightly easier with an L visa, because with an L visa, you're going to work in America for a bona fide business or company that's been resolved and checked out. So
in conclusion, the denial of L1, B1, B2 doesn't affect at all to L1 visa at all.
I didn't say that.
I mean, it depends on the reason.
What I would say is it would depend on the reason. And if you've just had a B1 denial and you immediately apply for an L1, well, then they might think, when you applied for the B1, were you really wanting to be a visitor, or were you really wanting to do something else? So I would recommend that you leave some gap, right, between your B visa denial and your L visa application. Because if you get denied one day and you apply the very next day for the other visa, I think that's going to look a little bit suspicious. But
okay, so there's another question about the interview, L1 interview. There's a lot of investors just like me, don't want any interview. So they just wonder how difficult of the L1 interview process in the consulate here, in your point of view.
In my point of view, it's not difficult if it's a genuine case. So the consular officer is likely to ask questions about the business that someone who genuinely is doing the job is going to be able to answer. They're going to ask questions about the potential role or the business in America that a genuine applicant is going to be able to answer. So it needs to be remembered that the role of the consulate is to promote commerce and relationships between Vietnam and America, and they're willing to help. Now, you and I, Karen, have been in meetings, right, where the US consular officer's been there. And,
a lot.
Yeah, and has the senior officer responsible for L visas in Ho Chi Minh City always been willing to help your clients?
So what the investor needs to prepare is prepare the information about how they operate the business in Vietnam and the US. That's all, because they are their real business and they do the real business in the US, so don't have anything to be scared of.
Sure, yeah. That's right.
Okay. So for L1 visa, investor and families required to stay in the US all the time, or they can go back and forth?
They can definitely go back and forth. Right, for an L visa, it's not an immigrant visa, so you're not required to maintain residency in the United States, but you would be required to have a job. So it would depend on the job a little bit. If you had an L1 visa to run the US operations of an international business, but you were also running the business in Vietnam, then it's going to be very natural that you'll be traveling in and out of the country a lot. But you're going to have to be in America enough time to be able to do the job that you applied for using the L visa.
Okay. And how long can they stay in the US?
Well, L1As and L1Bs are different, as you know. So the L1B specialist worker is 5 years, plus recapture time. And then there are other ways to extend it to if you apply for a green card. And the L1A is generally 7 years, plus recapture time. And again, there's some ways that you can extend that out if you applied for a green card.
Okay. So you mean that L1 is non-immigration visa? So how for the L1 investor to get the green card through EB1C? Right. Because they already have their business, they already expand their business in the US. So getting the green card through EB1C seems like not very difficult for them, right?
I agree. So EB1C criteria are very similar to L1, which is why a lot of L1 people use EB1C to change their L1 visa into a green card. It's not very difficult to do as long as you qualify. You've got to have a larger business, you have to be an executive, some rules about another layer of management. But just as a general idea, as long as your business is successful and it's getting larger, we would need to look at the circumstances, but it's not that difficult.